Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a coffee, Patreon, crypto and thanks button in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and X. Now we are joined by Jardo, Click OK, Brian's Logic, Neil, Wandek, and a whole bunch of people in the Flat Earth Debate Discord server. So, welcome one and all.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, good to be here.
You were just talking there about...
Sorry, mate, go on. You go for it, Brian, yeah.
Thanks, Monday. We were just talking about measurements and all that, you know, as we often do in the pre-show and that. Like, if we want to go into the truth, the mere existence of angular size measurement with distance, like the mere existence of that means that the Earth is flat. Besides the fact that they don't have perspective on the globe side, the point being is that that's a vertical height above horizontal plane of reference. And as I pointed out many times with the example I used with Mount Everest, if you're measuring the angular height of Mount Everest from Kathmandu Valley, which is close on 100 miles away, that angular height that you get, angular size you get, using the distance between Kathmandu Valley and Mount Everest, that angular size will match the remaining actual height of Mount Everest above the elevation of Kathmandu Valley. That can only happen and would only work if mean sea level is a horizontal plane of reference, so the Earth is flat. Do you know what I mean? And the same is true for many things in aviation and other things in surveying and also navigation. It's like these things, like the fact that they exist at all is the proof. Do you know what I mean? Outright proof, because these are things we can use in reality. These aren't just calculations that we can add after the fact. These are the facts.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
You know who found that out to his detriment?
Go on.
Conspiracy cats. Quote, "I'll give you a flat Earth for that," end quote, when utilising angular measurements over horizontal distances. You can only measure Earth flat. Now, Conspiracy Cat shortly after gave up his channel to MC Toon and relinquished his involvement in Flat Earth at all, based on having to concede to a utilisation of a flat Earth only linear distance for angular size. I'll just quote him again. "I'll give you a flat Earth for that." And that's because that's the only way it can function. Conspiracy Cats, now MC Toon's channel.
You know, when you said it, I just couldn't. I said, oh, you know, I was going, is it Jeremy? He was saying, is it Bob Nodell? I was saying, who is he thinking of? Of course, Conspiracy Cats. You know, the same is true for Simon Dan, isn't it, at present?
Well, would you want me to give you a different quote? "We don't only measure Earth flat," end quote, Simon Dan. Well, so you understand that we measure Earth flat then? Well, yes, of course he does. He's gone through and conceded to my acknowledgement of linear distance, horizontal measurements and prerequisite flat Earth elevation angles, and the video that Simon Dan's playing. And he says, well, yeah, of course, we do measure Earth flat at the local scale. Like, we can only measure locally. Whatever you can see and measure is your local measurement. If you can't see it to measure it, that would be not local, then you can't measure it. But all measurements without exception, as conceded to by Simon Dan, are flat. Now, there's a slow, maybe, upturn in understanding from our anti-flat Earth brethren that they must utilise flat planes and flat measurements, because that's how Earth's measured. Now, it's never had the squaring of the circle given to them in their education process. They've never had an excuse given to them for why all measurements of Earth are flat, but all measurements of Earth are flat. So when they go and look into how Earth gets measured, first you get the Earth gets measured flat bit, and then you get the because it's a really big ball afterwards. And they just parrot it. So they say, yes, we don't only measure Earth flat, but the flat Earth bit that we do measure locally is because it's a really big ball. Now that makes absolutely no sense, but to them, because it's written down in Wikipedia, suddenly that makes it make sense to them, even though it makes no sense in terms of measurement. What are the measurements? Well, of a flat Earth, of course. That's how it was, is, and always will be measured, because Earth is flat, exactly as it's measured, as conceded to by every single flat Earth opponent when they actually look at the measurements of Earth. Horizontal distances, rise over run, elevation angles, straight and level flight, sea level, elevation in general. All of these things are flat Earth only measurements. Nothing's going to change that. The fact that there's been a religious belief given to them from their Christian churches here in England doesn't change how Earth gets measured. Adding on that, well, it can be measured flat because we're on a really big ball is just an affirmation of their own cognitive dissonance. Doesn't change how Earth gets measured. It's flat.
I was in a discussion with a baller the other day, and just back and forth with the elevation angle and celestial navigation discussions we have on here and all that. And it came to the point where the globe believer had to tell me that an elevation angle can be obtained from a curved baseline as long as it's only a slight curve. That was his
not an
very
angle.
words.
Yeah, in their mind, there's a prerequisite being violated because it's only a little bit violated. So what if your elevation angle isn't straight, it's just a little bit bent, then it's no longer an angle. It is that simple. It's either an angle or it isn't. Now in their mind, it's just a little bit of bend. No, it isn't, because it's not an angle. Again, this is so common, One Deck, that we have defined this as the rock and the hard place. The rock is you accept, like, I don't know, Fugly Dave McKeegan measuring elevation angles in Antarctica for a 24-hour period. If his tripod hadn't got the better of him and outsmarted him, he'd have done it for a full 24 hours. But for the fact that Dave's very stupid and couldn't cope with a tripod, what he did cope with was measuring elevation angles. That's what he measured. There's no disputing what he measured. There's a little number with a degree symbol after what he measured. Now, if you say, oh, well, that's only because it's a little bit bent, well, then it's a little bit not an angle anymore. That would be the hard place. A denial of your own measurements, because suddenly they're not angles anymore. Oh, well, yeah, they are angles. Well, then you're measuring Earth flat. Again, it goes without saying, you're the one putting a little degree symbol after something that represents two straight lines meeting at a vertex when you measure Earth for 24 hours. Unless you're really stupid like Dave McKeegan, you can't wrap your head around your own equipment. You know, other than the dunces like Dave McKeegan, people who do measure Earth flat for the full 24 hours in Antarctica understand implicitly, like MC Toon, when he's waving around his flat Earth measurements at Brian in debate, like he's somehow got a win because he's measured Earth flat for 24 hours with little degree symbols after prerequisite flat Earth elevation angles taken from surface level. These are their measurements. They don't have to like it.
I remember, just on One Deck's point, I made a video a couple of years ago now, because I heard Charles Glover Matt on Bev's show, talking to Bev, saying that you can measure an angle off of a curve in GeoGebra once it's only a small distance, right, the adjacent, right? And I knew that was a load of rubbish, right? And I went and I made a video and I showed And I made a circle of radius 3,959 miles, and I brought it down the distance between 2 points as small as I could make it. And GeoGebra still had to add in a straight line. There was never a point where GeoGebra was ever going to accept this what would look almost like it's completely flat to the naked eye. The GeoGebra was never going to accept that as not being curved, because it's part of a circle, part of a sphere, let's just say, in their paradigm. Point being is that I had to make this video, right, because this guy was going around talking rubbish.
You mean lying?
And yeah, and afterwards, he said, one of the things he said he was going to do was contact GeoGebra about it, the company.
You say, so what you're saying is this, in defiance of the computer's refusal to violate an axiomatic principle, this religious believer in curves forming angles said, I will approach this system developer and tell them to make their system violate an axiom so that it fits in with my religious belief. Correct?
Yes.
Shout out to Jardo. Says Tripod Dave. Yeah, that would be one of my panel members laughing at Dave's inability to cope with using a tripod. Failing miserably in what was suggested to be a once-in-a-lifetime trip, possibly to Telly's, in a tent somewhere, possibly on Antarctica. Either way, a flat Earth prerequisite elevation angle was made for a full 24-hour period. Other than Dave McKeegan, who's too damn stupid to use a tripod. Yeah, that's right. Thank you for the super chat, Jardo. Really appreciate the support.
It's a tripod,
Yeah.
Nathan, not a tripod.
A tripod? Yeah, Dave couldn't cope with his own tripod.
Yeah, within the video I made, I showed in CAD and in GeoGebra where none of them will accept, because all I had to do was show what's his name's Robert. Remember what's his name? He made the CAD thing for celestial navigation. He's often shown.
Oh yeah,
Rob Durham. Yeah, Rob Durham. I just had to show that because one half of what was selected was not a line, right? Because CAD wouldn't recognize the curve as a line, right? GeoGebra wouldn't recognize the curve as a straight line. Right? None of them would. So, Charles Glover at Math, his go-to was he was going to contact GeoGebra. It's like, are you crazy? You know what I mean? You're going to contact GeoGebra to try and get them to change reality within their program, their application, so you can sleep easier at night.
They would sooner see bloody buildings fall down than concede that Earth is being measured flat, basically. Yeah, I don't mind if any tools that are used in terms of surveying, measuring, utilisation of maps, charts, any of this stuff. Bend it all! Let the world burn. That's their attitude. Rather than defy their own religious belief that they're on a sphere, they'd rather have axioms bent. I mean, it's literally come to the point where they'll tell people who are making programs to violate axioms than concede that Earth isn't being measured spherically. Because it can't be. We're utilising angles and horizontal distances.
Well, if you think about, let's look at Jaron's Home Depot, right? If we were on a sphere, how would you build Home Depot if you were trying to treat the surface of the floor as a tangent?
You
It
don't.
would mean that
It means that
Well,
you're
see,
building
this is-
out to a
yeah.
line out in space as opposed to on the surface.
Well, it's worse even than that, because if you treat the center of the Home Depot as the very center of the Home Depot, let's just say it's a square, right? Big square. And that very point in the center is touching the sphere at one point, so that makes the whole concrete floor, right, a tangent plane. How are you determining, right, the level throughout that floor?
You can't. You first need an
You can.
axiomatic horizontal plane of reference to reference your horizontal width. So you can't.
Exactly, because when they're trying to claim ridiculously that level is an equidistant distance from from a central point of the central point of a sphere, that's not going to work for a Home Depot. You wouldn't even be able to build a Home Depot. Never mind that bigger, simply because either corner of that Home Depot will not be an equally distant, from the center of the globe, and the zeniths at those four corners will have to be parallel to each other. But that's not going to work in any way, shape, or form. So none of it can work. If we're on a globe, none of that could work. There is no way to level the floor. Do you know what I mean? There's no way to build a road or a railway. It's just not possible. You just don't have mean sea level as a horizontal. It's not there. Their sea level is a curve. You can't determine elevations. You can't determine level. Nothing is determinable, if that's a real word.
I think we should just rewrite all geometry, and rather than having axiomatic principles like all verticals being parallel, all horizontals being parallel, just get rid of parallel. And then everything will be cushy and the religion of a ball can stand. I mean, we don't only measure Earth flat, end quote, Simondan.
It's funny you should bring up parallel, because I was having a bit of a thing earlier with a baller on one of my comment on one of my videos. We're trying to say that curves can be parallel, right?
No.
I said, right? Well, this is the thing. The initial search on Google will tell you a curve can be parallel to another curve. Whereas it can be equally distant from the other curve, but it won't be parallel, right? But when you actually search it correctly in actual geometry, it'll give you only straight lines or planes. Now, two circles can be parallel, but not the curved part, the planar part of the circle, right? So you can have two circles, one above the other or next to each other, and the planar parts of those circles, because they're two-dimensional, they will be parallel to each other because they're flat, right? But the curved parts on the outside, they're not parallel. They might be equidistant from each other, but they won't be parallel. Yeah, and other than that, you can have concentric circles, but that's not parallel. But you have AI out there trying to say, you can have parallel curves. It's like, no, you can't.
Yeah. Well, this is the point where, in the same way, just one sec, one deck. If you have AI running the show when it comes to building things, that is when we'll have buildings collapsing. In the same way as court cases collapse because AI just makes stuff up to suit the person that's asking it to fulfill a task. Oh, well, I need there to be a case law that says that Danny Masterson's harassment of the witnesses is perfectly acceptable. Here's a case where that was shown. You just made it up, did you, AI? So you've essentially destroyed this case? Well, that will be what happens to the buildings when suddenly axiomatic principles of all horizontals running parallel with the plane of the horizon stops being the case because curves can be parallel, says AI. See how quickly your building falls over.
Exactly.
I'm just going to point out about the parallel. If you take them to their Earth curve calculator and look at the eye level and surface level being parallel with each other, neither of them are curved.
What's better?
No.
Sorry, I was off mute. I was talking to one of the cats. He fully heard me.
Well, the cat heard you. Did you want to repeat it?
Nah. It was like Neil the other day with, here, boy. It would have been like that.
Yeah, so in the pre-show we were covering, I did a proper plug for Ali. I keep wanting to call her McFreedom, and it's not McFreedom. I've forgotten her name. What's she called? Ali McForever.
Or something?
McForever. And I played through that video to reiterate how cognitively expensive it is to square circles, where you have a cognitive bias towards the sphericity of the surface. You can simultaneously measure it flat and hold true to a belief until someone comes along and puts the two together. So Brian and I were pointing out how with various family members, we can discuss how axiomatically flat Earth gets measured, surveyed, charted, navigated, and there'll be no argument until you draw a conclusion that defies their religious belief. Until you say, yeah, we're measuring horizontal distances across the surface of the plane of Earth because Earth is flat. Well, before you say that final statement, there's a prerequisite. It kind of goes without saying when you're describing measuring a horizontal distance or an elevation angle. It can only be flat. That's what an elevation angle is. Elevation is from the surface. That's what elevation means. Angle means two straight lines. So you don't have to say, well, that's because the surface is flat. It's part of an axiom utilised when you describe the word angle in measurement context. So you're going beyond and above what is required when you redundantly state that that means the surface must be flat. That's redundant. But in adding that redundant statement, it causes controversy because it highlights the glaring contradiction of the, up until that point, ball believer, because he hasn't suddenly got the glaring cognitive dissonance to have to cope with and mentally process. That can be kept separate. Yeah, we measure Earth flat with elevation angles, like this angle on screen, called an altitude angle to the sun, off a plane, with two straight lines, one being the surface, because it's an altitude angle, otherwise known as elevation angle. It can't not be the surface. It's an altitude angle. But do I have to say it's got to be the surface? Well, the clue's in the title. It's describing altitude or elevation. That's not from some tangent out in space. It's off the surface. It's part of the title. I don't have to highlight it. But when I do, because we're living in a world where people think they're on a ball and they think that this line along the surface is actually bending. So they'll tell you, well, we can still form an angle and bend this line. No, you can't. It won't be an angle anymore. Again, we define this in the pre-show. It's part of our definition of your problem when you can't cope with your own measurement of a flat Earth. When you say, well, it's bending. Well, then it's not an angle anymore. It's not a measurement. So you haven't got a little degree symbol you can put after a number because it's formed with a straight line off the surface for it to be called an altitude angle. You don't want that to be an altitude angle anymore. You don't want it to be an angle. You want part of the line to be curved. Well, that's not an angle. You haven't got a measurement anymore. What you want to simultaneously accept that it's a flat Earth prerequisite and only can be measured off a flat surface, but because it's a really big ball. No, that still means that you're jeopardising the actual functionality of the angle that you've just measured off the surface with a little degree symbol that means it can only be a straight line on the surface. Again, I don't have to highlight that that means Earth is flat. It's part of the function of the measurement. But in so doing, suddenly I can be shoved to the bottom of the lists, have all my videos removed from any searches, and be trodden and diminished by all of our anti-flat Earth opponents who will say something similar, which is, oh, well, you don't only measure Earth flat. Yes, we do measure Earth flat with linear horizontal distances, but that's only on a small scale because we're on a really big ball. When they literally verbally state the cognitive dissonance they're experiencing, they can be promoted by the algorithm.
The diagram you have on screen there, the one you had on a moment ago with the sun, they're very misleading because they're giving you this impression that the sky is curved. Because you can see it there, the celestial sphere is written on that. Now, it's a dome, it's all you ever, but they're giving the impression that the sky is curved. And they're placing you at like that little black dot. Really, that little black dot there would be the globe, and you're in the center of that. That's what.
Yes, that's correct.
Elite.
Correct.
You're not.
Yeah, exactly. You've got.
Yeah,
it does just let me point out so the audience can see it before it disappears off screen. You've got 0 degrees, and it's gone. 180 degrees on the other side. Well, that's because what you're actually showing is a glorified protractor, and we covered this on Wednesday's show. The sky must be flat for that to functionally work. The ground must be flat and parallel with the sky for you to measure it through a protractor view. But the view that they present is a dome. It's like, no, that would be the protractor that you're using to measure the flat sky and flat ground parallel with one another. They can only be parallel with one another. Again, in this diagram, it's got 180 and 0. 180, 0. Curve overview isn't the curved sky. The sky isn't curved. Now, this particular diagram isn't even referencing visual anything. This is an auditory representation. If you look where the triangle terminates, it's at the guy's ear, because it's describing the same thing, but for audio. You still use a plane of reference, and you can still describe it with a visual 180 to 0. That's a protractor.
Well, what's good about this is this actually kind of says it all, because if we were to put this into their paradigm, that person's head, that head there would be the globe, and around him would be the celestial sphere. Whereas the reason, like that is very apt, even though it's not for that, even though it's to do with audio, it's very apt because the globe only does exist in someone's mind. Do you know what I mean? That's the only place it exists as a concept in people's minds. Like, but the whole, at least in that they have an actual right triangle, whereas on the other diagrams they had two straight lines meeting a curve. That's not an elevation angle. You don't have a curved vertical height. There is no curved height. Height, even if it's off the surface of a sphere, mathematically is still a straight line. But they're trying to, with a lot of these diagrams, is to infer an angular height, but not turn it into an actual vertical, real world height or a vertical. They're trying to infer an angular height without the vertical. But the vertical is the height, because whether it's the height of a mountain or it's the angle to a celestial body, it's the vertical. It's like elevation or altitude is vertical, is a vertical straight line. It isn't a curve, as they were trying to show on those two diagrams. If you know what I mean. There's no curved altitude or curved elevation. The elevation is a straight line. The altitude is a straight line above the surface. You know, that's what it is. So them trying to show it as a curve is very misleading. Very misleading.
Misleading because axiomatically they also will always require surface level and eye level be parallel with one another. Like on this diagram on screen, even when you're inferring there's a physical geometric sphere edge for a horizon marked with S in this diagram, you still need to acquire H off the surface level, H being the height. So H is acquired with a parallel eye level once acquired. Parallel with what? Well, the surface level you measured the height off. In terms of the mathematical function being performed to derive the dip angle measurement to a point that hijacks perspective in the distance in an orthographic mathematics, you still require the principle of parallel holds true. You still require surface level to be level, and you still require eye level be parallel with it. Even when you think you're describing a curving surface, surface level is still flat, or you won't measure your height from it, or your eye level won't be parallel with it, or your dip angle functionality won't function anymore. Earth is even flat when you're suggesting sphericity.
So what you're saying, Nathan, is sorry, Brian.
Oh, go ahead, Warren.
Just saying what Nathan's saying is when they start to say that surface level isn't level and we're not using horizontal and parallel, then this is their globe Earth calculator. If they're denying all this, then they have no measurements.
Yes, correct. So nicely summarised. Again, I did it about 5 minutes ago, but I'll do it again. The hard place has just been summarised by one deck. What's that you say? The surface level curves? Oh, really? So this surface level required to be parallel with eye level in your own mathematics is curving? Oh, well, then this maths absolutely fails completely, abysmally. It won't work anymore. You require surface level to be parallel with eye level or your maths fails. But you want to bend it? That's called the hard place, where you don't have any measurements anymore, because they all fail when you start denying the axioms they rely upon. Oh, what's that? You want to accept surface levels flat and eye levels parallel? Welcome to flat Earth. We call that the rock, where you first accept that you will and can only measure Earth flat in order for you to believe you're on a ball. Well, you're not. You've just measured Earth flat, and it must always be measured flat. It was always measured flat, is being measured flat for you in your Earth curve maths, and will always be measured flat in future when we build it, survey it, map it, chart it, sail on it, fly over it. Earth's flat. That's how it's measured. Nothing's ever going to change that. And nothing ever has changed it. Again, this also answers the question, well, what difference does it make to life? None. Whether or not you believed, past tense, you were on a ball didn't alter how Earth was functioning. And had been functioning up until this point. You just had a religious belief that you were standing on a curved surface we all measured flat. Don't believe me? Go and check any measurement of Earth. Go and look at how we fly over Earth. Go and look at how we sail on Earth, how we've scaled Earth and mapped Earth and charted Earth. It's all flat. There are no exceptions. And when someone like Dan lies to you and says we don't only measure Earth flat, he's just a liar. We only measure Earth flat. There are no exceptions. And you would require it to be so to believe you're on a ball. Now, your ball belief does not supersede or undermine any of the Earth measurements that we have always been using. So nothing changes. Just your dumbass globe belief would be relinquished. Nothing about Earth and its measurements would change. It was, is, and always will be measured flat. That's because Earth's flat. Shocking, isn't it? Suppress him immediately!
Well, I went in hard on the dip correction some years back because I have to admit, not that I was wrong to make the videos I made on it, because that's what if they were wrong, I would take them down. They were right. But the problem is with the dip correction, which is like between surface level and eye level, you've got to infer a point out on that surface level is like where the horizon is an actual place.
Yeah, you've got to infer it's below the surface level. You've got to infer a physical geometric sphere for a horizon below the surface level.
No. I'm talking about to do the dip correction because you're not referring to a globe's geometric edge when you do the dip correction.
Oh, okay.
Right, because this is the thing. They try and make their 7/6R be close to the mathematics that fit the dip correction. And they're very close to it. Not exactly the same, but close to it, right? There's a small differential in it. But the thing is, what the dip correction, I remember listening when I went search further into it. I heard this, listen to this, I think it was a Turkish ship's captain saying the dip correction is the most untrustworthy correction in celestial navigation, he said. And it made sense to me that he would say that because you've got to pre-assume that the horizon you're using is a certain distance away from you based off of your eye height. Now, your eye height will not give you a distance to the horizon. The horizon is not, because if it did, the horizon, then that would be a geometric point. But the horizon is not geometric, right? It's not geometric for a globe or for a flat Earth. It's not a geometric. So when you taking an angle between the horizon, you're using the horizon and between that and the celestial body, and you then infer that this horizon is at a certain distance away from you because you're 25 feet above the water or whatever. You have nothing to base that on. That horizon, what I mean is that will mess up your angle. That'll give you a small differential every time, unless you're by pure chance. Like what I mean is that it's never workable. Technically, the dip correction is never workable. Never. Because the horizon is never going to fit what you want it to fit. So when you subtract that little bit from your angle, just a second. When you subtract that little bit from your angle, you actually, you're hoping that you end up with a horizontal line at the eyes when you don't. You know what I mean? You're not ending up. You end up with something most of the time, and I mean 90% of the time at least, if not more, where the line is slightly dipped below horizontal or slightly above horizontal. And that's where your angle is never totally correct. That's one of the reasons they bring in sight reduction. So the dip correction is really, even though it is between surface level and eye level, you have to pre-assume a load of stuff that's not real to make it work. Just wanted to throw that in there because of that surface level and eye level thing. Sorry, one day, you're trying to say something, was it?
Yeah, that's what the bowler who told me that the elevation angle can be acquired off a slightly curved baseline, was trying to push me down that road the other day or night, whenever it was. We were talking about the dip correction. He was trying to ask me he wanted me to give him a distance to the horizon and the formula. I didn't go down that road. I've shown him the almanac where it's obviously states that the dip correction is the height of I above sea level. And I wouldn't budge off that. It's written in the almanac. It tells you what it is. And there's a calculation that you do depending on your eye height above sea level. And that's where I kept it. Because that's what you're doing. You get your eye height above surface level. But he was going to go down that road, Brian. That's where he was trying to push. So there is something in there, like you say, and they try and wriggle around that and try and make it seem like the Earth is a globe, even though we're measuring it flat and horizontal.
Yeah, because that correction, it won't fit a globe Earth, but because of how the correction is done, it preassumes that the horizon is a particular distance away because you're at 25 foot high, right? Now, the problem with that is this, right? The horizon is something that doesn't stay in one place. It can appear closer to you now, depending on if you have a demarcation point, and further away later on, just because of a change in the weather. You don't change that, and you're on the same high height above the water. You don't have any special optics, just your eyes. And the weather changes, and suddenly the horizon appears closer to you or suddenly further away from you than it did earlier on in the day. The point, especially when you're out, and if you're out at sea, like, you will notice when there's a good clarity comes in, you will notice that the horizon can appear very far away from you when you're out on the water. But you have no idea, like, that's only an apparent position. You have no idea, like, it's not so much I'm wrong to say you have no idea. I'm going to say you have no idea how far away it is. It doesn't have a distance, but they give it a distance with the dip correction. And that's the problem. You can't give it a distance. So they have to make up a distance based off of an eye height that doesn't exist for the dip correction. Maybe they had no choice, because you'd have to figure out how you would do the dip correction otherwise. How you would subtract it otherwise. I would have thought it would be easier to subtract. See, I would have thought it would be easier to subtract the eye height above the water as opposed to bringing the line from the horizon up to the eye, bringing the eye down to the water. But the problem is that your angle is between the horizon and the celestial body. And without going into too much of the minutiae of it, it's a bit of a fraud, right? The dip question, it is a fraud. Because what is the horizon? It's just an optical phenomenon. It's not a geometric point. So how can you give it a distance? You can't. No matter what
Brian, it's where the boats go over, proving that it's the curvature of Earth.
But they don't. Even in their own mathematics, that doesn't happen. That's the point. When Nathan came in earlier, what he was saying was correct concerning their position. Their geometric edge only exists in the maths below surface level. So boats don't even do that in their paradigm.
Yeah. It's funny though, because I'm working with this guy, and that's what he told me. So this is getting around, and people are learning the phrases to say, like that's what he said. What about when the boats disappear? They got to be going over a curve. Well, how can you explain it? It's like, wow, these answers are just like it's built in them. They did a great job promoting heliocentrism.
But see, people, this is the thing, is the horizon. Think about what's the horizon? It's a horizontal line. And they tried to say it was the edge of the globe. You know what I mean? It's a gaslight from word go. They're gaslighting you from the moment that you come into the world about this globe. They're gaslighting you. Or see that straight horizontal line out there that we use, right? That line that we use, right? As a reference for the orientation of horizontal, that's actually the curved edge of a globe. You know what I mean?
That's a good one.
Yeah, but when I break that down, they immediately say, then if it's flat, how come we can't get to the edge? I'm sure somebody could take a boat to the edge. It's like very frustrating, man. Very frustrating.
So, yeah, what you're saying is they immediately take you to a straw man.
That's correct.
Yeah. So they can give you a bit of a false equivalence and ask you to prove where something that has no bearing on axiomatic principles like horizontal and parallel, it has no bearing on it. But where's your edge? What the hell's that got to do with how we measured Earth and how you will require it to be measured? Suddenly I've got to prove that there's an edge. Where's the dome? I didn't even mention it. What are you talking about? What dome? Well, if there's flatness, then there must be a dome. How big? Where's your map? What are you talking about? I'm not a cartographer. I'm a YouTuber. What are you talking about? What map? Well, if it's flat, you've got to have an accurate map. Well, all of them are flat. Yeah, because they come from globes. You're like, what? Why are we having this conversation?
Yeah.
You need it to be flat. It's axiomatic in your measurements. I've pointed that out, and suddenly I've got to justify where a map is and become a cartographer to have pointed this out to you. No, I don't.
Like the guy the other night, the same guy was trying to. He was telling the people who were in the room that I stated that celestial navigation was triangulation, which I never, and then tried to twist it round for me to give him a height to the luminary. That's what he was trying. He didn't succeed in that, by the way, but that's where he was trying to go with it all. This is what they do.
Yeah, that like stupid stuff like that, right? Height to the luminary. Now I've had to have that out and out with them, right? But I even made a video asking them to produce the height of the luminary using the way process they're asking me to produce it with, and none of them will take up the challenge. Right?
It's only fun. It's only fun when you're being the victim of a straw man, Brian. It's no fun when they're victim of their own straw man. Oh, right. Well, what's the height of the stars then? Oh, well, in your world, baller, you can have it infinite, can you? Why? Because you've put yourself inside a giant protractor you call the globe and then wrap the celestial sphere around that, and therefore you can't assert any distance, but you want me to give you the star distance when we point out that it's measured flat. Oh, yeah, seems totally reasonable.
Yeah, and even within their position, I mean, they must claim infinite distances because they require the parallel light, right? For them to infer the sphere that will be over their heads, not what they're standing on, right? But when they don't have to do that, they're giving you distances to these things. It's like, hang on a minute, how can Polaris have a distance now, but when you need to go to celestial navigation, you need to claim that it's an infinite distance away, which is a complete oxymoron. You can't have an infinite distance. It's not a distance. A distance is finite. Infinite is a joke as well. Doesn't exist in mathematics. You know, it doesn't exist in reality or mathematics. You know, what kind of a concept is infinite? You know, in the world we live in, it's a joke. Yeah. So, but this thing, go on, Wonder.
Sorry, I'm just agreeing with you, Brian. This is what they try and do. We want the height of the luminary. We're talking about celestial navigation. We're not interested in that. It's nothing to do with celestial navigation. We don't need the height of the luminary to find our position on the surface of Earth. All we're interested in is the distance.
That's not the answer. The answer is the luminary doesn't have a height. The luminary doesn't behave in a geometric manner for you to measure an actual height to it. You don't even know what it is. That's the truth. See, the problem is, we don't. One second. Right, give me a second. Many times we said to our opposition, we're not measuring the height of the luminary in celestial navigation. No, it's not that we're not measuring the height if we're using celestial navigation. It's not that they're not. Well, I'm not doing it, but people who do it. It's not that they're not measuring the height to the celestial body. Yeah, that's true, they're not. But there is no way to measure the height to the thing, because how can you measure the height of something when you can rise 6 miles up in the air and get the same exact angle to the same exact celestial body, right, over the same point on Earth at the same time? That means that there is no height to the things. If they work on the sea surface from a mountain or in an airplane, you know, from the same latitude, the person will get the same angle north of the equator, angle to Polaris, from either of those three elevations. You know, the top of the mountain, the sea level, and the airplane. You can't measure a height to them. They don't behave like terrestrial objects. They don't have a consistent geometric location. You can't do it. And that's why I made the video, asking them to do it. You do it. You show me how you get the height of them with your triangle. Right? And you prove that that is the height of it. None of them would take it up. None of them would take on the challenge because they know it's not possible. So they know when they're asking you that, they're asking you to prove an impossibility, something that they know can't be done.
Yeah, it's like, you know, you can take several different angular measurements to the sun throughout the day. Does that give the sun several different heights above the surface of sea level throughout the day? No, it doesn't. You're correct, Brian. It's got nothing to do with that in celeste navigation. We don't know the height of the luminaries. We don't know what they are. We're working with sea level, navigating the surface of Earth.
That's profound, Brian. I didn't realize that. You're right. So they ask, and that's the answer. We're giving them the answer they want, right? Instead of giving them the proper answer. They know.
Of course they know, which is why they must make them infinite for them. They know that because within my video, I pointed out that for them to do celestial navigation, they must measure off a tangent, which is an impossibility, but for them mathematically, right? And then move that tangent to their equatorial plane, right? Or they can measure from an airplane and move it then mathematically to their equatorial plane. How can they move that angle up and down if the celestial body didn't follow it? Do you know what I mean? The point being is that how can someone straight above me, 6 miles above me, take an angle to the same celestial body at the same exact time and get the same angle and us be able to measure the height of this? It's not possible. It's like trying to measure the top of a door frame that keeps going up as you raise up. Can't be done. Like, we treat them as two parallel planes, the Earth and the sky, when we're doing the measurements, right? But that plane above us, that say changes its apparent height in relation to, you know, that's why we measure it with angles, because angles aren't actual height.
Yeah, but that's where you get
turn an angular.
That's where you get brilliant lines from people like Simon Dunn and Dave McKeegan, where they'll say things like, well, Nathan Oakley says, because we measure Earth flat, that means Earth's flat. What kind of an idiot thinks just because we're measuring it flat, that means it's flat? That's what you'll get as a response.
Yeah. Yeah, but this is what a lot of people aren't taking on board, right? Because they're straw man so much by the borders. If I take an angular size of a mountain at a distance, right? And I just take the angle, right, from where I stand to the top of the mountain, and that angle is, 35 degrees. Then I turn to my right, 190 degrees, and I take an angle above the horizon or whatever, or with the horizontal. Let's say just use a theodolite. Take the angle from where I stand to the top of the mountain, 35 degrees. Or 90 degrees, right, and take an angle from that same horizontal, just turned around the theodolite, 90 degrees. Take an angle to a celestial body, two elevation angles, right? Vertical heights above the same horizontal plane, right? Both 35 degrees, right? The only reason I can turn that angle into an actual height for the mountain is because the mountain does have an actual geometric position that's constant, right? And terrestrially, we've figured out how to turn an angular size at a distance into an actual size, right? Or if we know the actual size, we can turn it into a distance. But we'll just work off of the distance giving us the actual size. We can't do that with celestial bodies. But I can get the same exact angle to the top of a mountain as I can the celestial body, right? The angle is just the angle. That's just the vertical height above the horizontal plane you've created, right? That horizontal plane is parallel to mean sea level. Both, because mean sea level is a horizontal plane. So both instances, it's exactly the same. Both those things are exactly the same until you go past that step. When you go past that step with the mountain, you can give it an actual size in feet and meters. You can't do that even within the citations from celestial navigation. You can't do that with celestial bodies. Because if you could, then you wouldn't be able to use a sextant in an airplane or an artificial horizon on land. Go on, sorry.
But all that, Brian, that's great for them, because all the time we're talking about that during the conversation, it takes away the conversation about using a horizontal baseline like sea level to measure an elevation angle from. You know, it gets them away from that fact of the matter, which is great for them.
I don't know one day, because when you're pointing out to them that nobody knows what these celestial bodies are, that causes them a major problem. That's worse for them in some ways, I've noticed, than it is when we're talking about the horizontal plane. Because when you're taking away that and what they're presuming they are, like the sky is, start taking that away, start pointing out to them, well, the sky is not actually a dome, or that's just mathematical. You start pointing out stuff like that to them. They don't like that at all. Like the diagram that was there earlier, right, where Nathan had the sun. There was a sun and over a dome, making a dome over someone, and someone was making an angle to the sun, right? In reality, you watch the sun and you even time-lapse it. It comes from the horizon, right? A straight line up to a zenith, and then back, what appears to be slanting back down to the horizon, right, or whatever. That's what you see the sun do. You don't see any curve. You don't see any circle being made by the sun. You see that. That is what you see. Now, that is not a curve. That's like up to the top. From your point of view, it's apparently like it's moving to the top of a circuit tent and then going back down. That's what it looks like, right? They have turned that into some diagram where it's making a big arc, 180-degree arc, that it's not making. We might use the arc of a protractor, and a protractor, you can have just a right-angle triangle. You don't need a protractor for those angles. But people use a protractor, right? You can use a protractor to measure the angles to it. But it itself is not going over the arc of the protractor. So these people are lost in diagrams. When you point out actual reality to them, it's like they don't like it. They really don't like it.
I was off mute. Who's making that noise?
Seems to have
That was
stopped.
me, sorry. I'm on mute.
Yeah, my point is that they want to take you away from talking about the flat plane that they're going to require to do anything, and that we all require and we all use the orientations of horizontal and vertical. You want to talk about the celestial bodies and measuring actual height to them and all this other rubbish. What's Polaris then? Tell me what it is. They can't tell you. They have no idea. They can come up with some BS story based on absolutely nothing, based on 50 pre-assumptions and 50 lies that most of them don't even realize they've been told. Right? And suddenly they're trying to tell you the composition and size and distance, and basically with some coordinates of the sky, the position of Polaris. You haven't got a clue. You know nothing about it. Nobody knows what it is. You can look at it with telescopes all day long. That won't tell you what it's made of, where it is, what it is, if it has a distance, which it can't have, because if it did, there'd be no way to measure it from an airplane the same as you will from sea level. You know, so when they want to straw man you, just asking them about the details of their straw man.
We're all made of stars, Brian. We wouldn't be here if stars didn't explode.
Yeah, cousins are rocks. That's what they handed you. No, what was it, Michelle Taylor? My cousins are rocks, or your cousins are rocks, or something like that. Yeah, that's the rubbish they'll try and tell you.
Stars have feelings.
Well, see, there you go. I say it again. I said it earlier. You're being gaslit from the minute you're born. You're being gaslit. You're being told things are different from what they really are. And it's not till you get older that it really becomes obvious how gaslit you've been. Like that, I'll go back to the example earlier of the little girl with her father saying, "No, Daddy, it's going down." He's saying, "It's not. It's going as far." Like he was so gaslit that he was trying to tell her it was doing something that she could see obviously wasn't doing. She had less gaslighting done to her because she was only a kid. He was like 25 years of gaslighting ahead of her. So that's why he was trying to tell her about how it's arcing out and it's escaping the orbit. And it's like, gravity. It's like, nah, it's not doing those things. It's going back down, Daddy. Because she was only a few years old, so there wasn't the same level of gaslighting. That's one of the main differences between kids and adults. Adults become gaslit we end up gaslighting each other to a point where we're a kind of idiots. We just can't accept what we see,
I've done it myself, Brian, with my kids. Stood on a beach on holiday, watching the sunset, and explained to my daughter that it's not actually the sun that's setting, it's because we're spinning away from it, was my very words.
Yeah, exactly. You were so gaslit into that paradigm that you were telling your daughter about something that you didn't realize you were BSing your daughter and you didn't realize it because you were BSed to such a high degree for your whole life. The horizon is the leading geometric edge of the globe. No, it's not. That's a horizontal line. And it's not geometric.
Yeah, I think I always sort of take it there now with the horizon. I think I always have for a long time. Did it again with that guy the other night when he was on about dip and distance to the horizon. I asked him to define what the horizon was. Yeah, I said it's not physical.
Exactly.
Never been defined as physical. What you're talking about, distance to it. You don't know what you're talking about. And I took it down that road.
Yeah, when they're leading geometric edge of their globe, there's a reason why they all have to get to the point. They all have to join in after Rumpus said it, that it only exists in the maths. Because it only exists in the maths. That's where it exists. It never existed in reality. Even within their own mathematics, it shows that they're trying to claim that what we see is not geometric. They're literally stating within their own mathematics that thing you see that you call the horizon, that isn't geometric. That is not the geometric leading edge of the globe, right? But you hit it. It's like the way a politician says something, right? It's like they say the quiet part out loud or something like that, but they say it in such a way where they confuse or fool the people they're saying it to, the statement they're making. They said to us, they tried to say, "Oh, it's a refracted position," because that's what's in their mathematics, right? Claimed to be so it's not not like, regardless of them not having any refraction, what they're claiming not being refraction. The point is that so it's not geometric then. That is what you're claiming. That's what's in your paradigm. That's what's in your maths. That it's not geometric. It's not the leading geometric edge of your globe then, the horizon. No, it's not. Right? So you've got nothing then. That's the end of it. You've got nothing then. Because that has to be that for your maths to even exist, as a measurement or anything. For this single medium non-refraction to even be based on it, you would need that to be that. Yeah, but as I said, it's worded different. It's like they try and say it's a 7 and greater than 7/6 or refracted horizon. What a heap of rubbish. You know what I mean? It's just a load of rubbish. What they're actually telling you is that is not the leading geometric edge of my globe that we were all told it was for whatever amount of time in your life. That's what they're really saying. See that thing out there? That is not the leading geometric edge of your globe.
Shout out to
That's actually what they're saying.
He says, how sea level deals with falling. Thank you for the super chat. I'm going to round out this live show.
Nathan,
yeah, go ahead.
You know where I'm going with that. What they're actually saying in their maths, isn't it? They're not saying, oh, that's actually a refracted horizon. What they're actually saying is that thing out there you call the horizon, that is not the leading geometric edge of our globe. That is not a
AKA Black Swan. At the point that they say refraction, they don't realise they're bashing their own face in with a shovel, because they're saying we don't have a geometric sphere edge for a horizon. They're saying refraction. Okay? Again, you could almost define it as the hard place. So you don't have any measurements of your physicality in geometric sphere edge then. So it's not the horizon then.
So the horizon's not the edge of your globe then.
Exactly.
That's the end of that then, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean,
welcome to Flat Earth. On that note, I am going to round out and say, if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley premiering streams, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, though, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. So another massive thank you to all of you who smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, joined as a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member, and all that good stuff. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.